into, what his potential is athletically. So I think with each guy, there's like a sort of separate question. With Jalen Carter, it's the off-field, like, makeup stuff. With Anderson, it's like, is what you see what you get? Are you going to get more out of him 2 or 3 years from now than what he is right now? But you know what you're getting right now. And then I think with Wilson, it's, how much room does he have to grow, and can you get that out of him?
What would you do if those three players and Anthony Richardson were somehow all there together? Who are you? And I'll throw Will Levis. Who do you want?
It's hard to pass on Carter because he's the best player, and I'll give you this context, Mike, on Carter. Like last year when Georgia had all those freaks, I think it was like 5 first-round picks on defense, right? And Jalen Carter was still a true sophomore. I had a number of teams telling me, like, Jalen Carter was the best prospect on that defense, right? Like, so, like, we're talking about a guy who, I think, like, I've heard him compared to Warren Sapp. So, like, the question is going to be whether or not, you're willing to gamble on some of the off-field stuff, and whether or not your program and your environment can absorb somebody like that and get the most out of him. It's hard because, like, I just think Will Anderson is, like, I don't know if Will Anderson's going to become Von Miller. Like, I don't know if he's that explosive an athlete, but, like, exactly what you're getting. You know what I mean? Like, so if Will Anderson falls to you at 5, it would be really, really hard for me to pass on that, even though I know there might be a higher ceiling with the other 2 kids.
Interesting. I think the name that has people here most excited is Richardson. And, it was interesting. As soon as the Geno deal got done, I want to ask you about the conversation you had with Schneider there, because I thought it was a really kind of good piece that got lost a little bit in the shuffle with the, with the free agency starting. But it felt like as soon as Geno got done and we found out that they could get out quickly, it was like, oh, all right, now you got to really start taking the quarterback situation seriously, because it felt like they were leaving themselves, that option for a reason. And I don't know whether this kid's as good as his potential says he could be, but man, the highlight reel is really, really crazy. Right.
So, let's start with the Geno contract. Like, I think the idea here, and I may have used this example with you, in the past, but I think, like, the idea is he's Alex Smith in Kansas City, where when Andy Reid and John Dorsey got to Kansas City, they acquired Alex Smith, and part of the idea was we're going to be able to contend with him, compete with him. Maybe we won't get over the top with him, but he's going to make it so we don't have to overreach for a quarterback that we may not really be in love with, right? Like, so he's going to buy us time to find the next quarterback, and while we're waiting for that guy to come along, we'll build the rest of the roster up. 4 years later, they find Patrick Mahomes, they trade all the way up, they go and get him, and off they go, right? Like, so, like, that's sort of the idea with Geno, I think. Richardson's fascinating because he just hasn't played a lot, and if you look at his attempts, like, I remember when Justin Fields was coming out 2 years ago, like, he hadn't, like, the big thing with him is he hadn't seen enough, like, he just hadn't thrown the ball in games enough. And he had over 600 college attempts. This guy has less than 400. So, like, that kind of gives you an idea how raw he is. In fact, I've had some teams tell me he doesn't need to sit, he needs to play. And, what it's going to take is a team almost throwing a season overboard and saying we're sacrificing this season to his development, because the high-end stuff is really there. It's just you're projecting in so many different areas because you haven't seen enough and he hasn't seen enough. So, like, it's the volume of stuff that you see. It's like, all right, like, so how's he going to react when he sees this? How's he going to react when he sees that? There's not a ton of evidence, So, like, Richardson's tantalizing. And I think in the right environment, he could really become something. The question is, can he create the right environment for him? And are you comfortable projecting in certain areas? Because there's so little, like, evidence of, and even, like, with the highlight stuff now, like, it's one of those things where it's like you can put together a great highlight reel of him. You just have to go through, like, a lot of tape to get there, It's just like one of those things where it's like you're projecting in so many different areas. Are you comfortable that he's going to get there? And that's what teams have to spend the next 6 weeks trying to figure out.
The other thing they can do, because they have not just 5 but 20, right, is I kept thinking about the A.J. Brown deal last year and the fact that was the 18th pick, essentially, that went for A.J. Brown. I don't think the Seahawks need to pull the trigger on something like that for a wide receiver, but is there a defensive lineman, an edge player that is out there that might be had for that same kind of capital, the number 20 pick or one of your top, you have 2 second-round picks as well. We kind of bounced around the name Vita Vea. It sounds like they restructured him, so maybe he's not an option. Maybe DeForest Buckner. Like, is there a game changer up there that you could bring in and pay with that same pick?
You want me to give you a fun idea? All right, so like I if you go back and you look at like last year and the way the teams did this, right? So it was a 2019 draft, right? Like where you had the 4 receivers that went in the second and third rounds. It was McLaurin, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, and Deebo Samuel, right? And so teams that needed receivers are sort of monitoring those 4. Is there one where like negotiations are going to fall through to the point where one of them could be available? One of the 4 became available. That was that wound up being A.J. Brown, like you said. So I think like you can do the same thing with the 2020 draft. That's where you want to look and take a look at like guys in that draft who, like for one reason or another, there may be a reason. There may be like the team that they're on may not be like fully all in on doing a contract extension with them. How do you feel about Chase Young?
Great. I feel great about Chase Young.
So here's the thing. So consider this, right? So the Commanders have paid Daron Payne. They paid Jonathan Allen. So 2 of their defensive linemen are paid. They've been really wishy-washy whether or not they're going to pick up the 5th-year option on Chase Young, right? He had a catastrophic knee injury. I mean, this is more than an ACL, and that's part of the reason why there's some hesitancy there. They've also got Montez Sweat on their roster, who's going to cost a lot of money to keep. Do you call the Commanders and say, we'll take one or the other for your first-round pick? Like, do you think about that?
Yes, and here's why. Not only does it work for the Seahawks because they get a proven player for that pick rather than taking a gamble at that sort of spot where you never know exactly what you're getting, but it works for the Commanders because, as you said, they're not going to be able to pay both, and they're going to need extra picks to go after Lamar Jackson so that they can give him a guaranteed contract, and Dan Snyder can screw all the other owners on his way out the door.
Well, like I said, I don't know if I'd take those extra 2 steps.
Okay, fine.
But I do think like it's one of those where those are the sorts of situations you're looking for.